created everything. Look what a powerful being you are. You did these things, but now you're in a human body, you forget the power you have.
What you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing.
You're doing it.
Doing what?
Using your imagination.
Welcome to Meta Mystics, where you don't know what you don't know. My name's Jonathan, and today it's just me. I went on to an episode with Chris Matthew from Forbidden Knowledge News, and it was an amazing time. A lot of weird and wild concepts thrown out there about the 7 Hermetic principles, the 7 days of creation, Carl Jung, and the subconscious archetypes of the mind and everything. We went deep on this one. So yeah, it's wild and very out there. I love these kind of conversations, people with open minds, just to explore theories and concepts and just to really look almost into the shadows that they don't want you looking into. That's our specialty over here. So hopefully some of the concepts that I brought up to him is not going to get him canceled. I don't think that it's going to, because Chris is very open-minded, and he does talk a lot about conspiracies, as do I, so me and him are very similar in that sense. But yeah, we went wild and all over the place. If we're really trying to understand what maybe they were teaching in secret mystery schools and secret societies, and really trying to explore the depths of what it means to exist in general, and how people have kind of grouped that into certain symbolism, in secret societies and mystery schools and all that kind of stuff. Very, very interesting thought, and my mind was absolutely blown whenever I was doing the research, just about almost how perfect the 7 Hermetic principles line up perfectly with the 7 days of creation. If we're to look at the 7 days of creation in the Bible and look at it from a spiritual standpoint, a psychological standpoint, trying to understand the birth of the subconscious and the conscious mind into the individual, into the human, then it makes perfect sense just going into all of the Hermetic principles and aligning it that way. So the Hermetic principle, number 1 being mentalism, number 2 being correspondence, number 3 being vibration, number 4 polarity, number 5 rhythm, number 6 cause and effect, and Hermetic principle number 7 is the principle of gender. And just how perfectly they lay up on top of each other when you're trying to just compare and contrast the 7 days of creation and the 7 Hermetic principles is wild. And then, of course, you got to mix in a little Jungian psychology, because if that's what we're really trying to understand, you kind of got to jumble a lot of them up together and see what it tastes like a little bit. So yeah, it was a very, very fun conversation. And I'm very thankful for Chris allowing me to go on to his show today on a Sunday. I usually don't shoot Sundays, but I felt bored. I wanted to do something fun. And what's more fun than going down spiritual rabbit holes, Just to have your mind blown on a regular basis. It's the good times. So, yeah, listen in. And then at the end of the show, since it was kind of like a swapcast, I didn't do like a tarot reading. It was more of his show. So at the end of this show, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a tarot reading for the episode that I just did with Chris Matthew. And we'll see if it aligns. Let's see what the conversation went like. Hang tight.
Jonathan, welcome back. How you doing?
Awesome, dude. Really looking forward to this conversation. Let's get weird, baby.
I love it, man. Always a wonderful time. Seems like the path of awareness can be extremely difficult these days once you become aware of the true nature of our systems of control. Trying to navigate the deceptions, the inversions, it can cause depression, anxiety, and even a little bit of psychosis. And you and I have been exploring the deeper levels of reality for a while now. For me, my reality has become much easier to navigate now that I have begun to explore spiritual paths and possibilities. There's a delicate balance between our material and spiritual path, especially for me. Going too deep into any system can become dangerous as well. And today you wanted to share some insights from your own spiritual journey. There's a lot to get into with this from what you were messaging me about before. Very excited to get into this. Before we do, for those that may not be familiar, just tell us a little bit about yourself and let them know how they can find out more.
So I am the host of two podcasts. I run or I co-host Meta Mystics podcast, where we get into all of the different spiritual, philosophical, magical, all the occult kind of stuff, just exploring, everything that is encompassed over there with that kind of stuff. But I also, my first podcast that I ever created was the Cult of Conspiracy. And the Cult of Conspiracy is just exactly what it sounds like, diving into every conspiracy that you can imagine. We are coming up on episode 1000 over there, which is kind of crazy. Been doing it over the course of, 5+ years now. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, dude, if it was because of the Cult of Conspiracy and looking into all these, the crazier conspiracies, 9/11, moon landing, COVID, all the wild ones, right? And many, many more, obviously, that has caused my reality to just like shatter every single episode. Whenever you start looking a little bit deeper into the whys and the hows and the whos and the whens and all of that kind of stuff, it really starts to shatter the illusion of the reality that you thought was pretty stable. And so that caused me to start looking deeper into everything, really trying to find the absolute truth. There has to be some kind of absolute truth, you would imagine, because there always seems to be some kind of underlying reason why, at least in the conspiratorial realm, why they would do such things, right? And so that's what opened me up to, creating Meta Mystics and just trying to find out the truth of everything with no boundaries. And one thing that I found with conspiracies in general is that, most people like to link back all of the conspiratorial stuff to like religious underlyings. And it's always kind of geared in some kind of good versus evil, God versus Satan, Jesus versus Satan, that whole thing. And I'm like, all right, well, let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Well, the problem is whenever you start diving in deeper into that route, it's almost like, you ever had a dream and like everybody in that dream is wearing a hat? Okay. And so you're like, you know what? It's kind of hot outside. Let me take this hat off. And everybody stares at you and looks at you like, I can't believe you just did that. We all wear hats here. Like, everybody's wearing a hat. Why are you not wearing a hat? And that's the look that I get whenever I start questioning things that I guess I'm not allowed to question, but I don't like rules. I'm kind of a little bit of a renegade in that sense.
Right on, man. Well, based on some of the things that I mentioned in the introduction, what are your observations about the current state of our reality? Seeing that much of what we're presented is honestly theatrics. The deeper you dive into anything presented in the news or even on social media, the more you find out that there is some level of manipulation and control in the narratives being presented, at least those mainstream narratives that try to steer society in certain ways. But seeing that there's so much theater out there, what are your observations about the state of the everyday person? I think they're trying to portray it as there is global psychosis and we're almost in a state of civil war. But when I go outside and talk to the everyday person, my neighbors, people on the street, my friends, they're cool. There's nothing wrong with these people. We're not about to throw down. There doesn't seem like there's tensions in the streets. Although I don't live in a big city, I don't know why you'd want to anyway, but that seems to be where that kind of stuff concentrates anyway, and they're trying to herd people into the cities. That's a whole other situation. But as far as your everyday person, and I think a greater portion of the population is more on the side of humanity than not. What are your observations about that?
I think that too. I think that the internet is kind of like a wild, wild west. And it reminds me of, do you remember it was a few years ago that people were going to storm Area 51 and go and,
Yes.
and they were going to go all clap alien cheeks, right? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was a thing. And people were liking it and saying they were going by the hundreds of thousands, if not the millions. And then the day
Yes.
actually shows up and not even 1,000 people show up. I think
Mm.
that the illusion is that people are trying to portray somebody or something or some kind of ideology on the internet that they're more than likely not going to do, not going to live up to. Maybe that's just a facade that they're kind of living behind. And it's just trends. And the problem with the problem with that kind of stuff is that trends fade. You know, trends die over time. You know, there was a point in time where the youth were eating Tide Pods until people found out that, like, shocker, it's not good for you, and so maybe you shouldn't do it. You know, and I think that the internet is, like I said, just kind of like a wild, wild west in that sense. So whenever people in the mainstream on news and social media, they're trying to almost evoke this weird eschaton. You know, and this is something that I really love getting into. It's like a fake bringing about of the end times, so that they can start to implement, you know, certain stricter rules and surveillance, and starting to take away your freedoms, and really shining a light on those that don't have, because we want everybody to be equal. Well, how do you get everybody to be equal outside of socialism and communism? I think that is the route, right? And, you know, and I've seen a lot of people really trying to paint Trump as this antichrist. I mean, I don't think that it's that cut and dry, to be honest with you. I think that most people don't even understand what Christ is, let alone try and describe what antichrist would be, personally.
Right, 100%. There is so much that is being portrayed, like you said, to evoke certain reactions to that bring about fear, and in order to maintain states of control, obviously. So people right now are becoming aware of a lot of things, though. Even most of the people that I speak to have a level of awareness that surprises me at times about the nature of reality, about the nature of our systems, government, things of that nature, how corrupt it really is. And it gives me hope that maybe there's more people becoming aware of this stuff than at least than the media wants to be portray, or that, you know, the mainstream society wants to believe. But there's another side of it, people becoming aware and people trying to find answers, but without any spiritual path, it can become difficult to navigate everything. Let's get into what you've been looking into as far as a spiritual path and how you've been navigating some of the madness.
So, my first kind of break into understanding the world a little bit better is just by shifting my perception and looking at it through a different lens. And shout out to a guest that we've had on Metamystics a few times now. His name is Optimistic Banks. He's a conscious rapper. Awesome, awesome guy. Very, very bright individual. And you know, he was talking about how it's really just all one consciousness. And I'm not going to lie, that wasn't the first time I had ever heard it, but to take it literally is quite different, right? That if there is really only one thing going on, and kind of like the pantheistic idea that, you know, all is just one giant consciousness. Well, then you start really looking into like Hermeticism, and the idea around the seven Hermetic principles, with, you know, the first Hermetic principle is that the all is mind, and the mind is all. Is that's all there is just mind, followed by, you know, obviously the six other Hermetic principles. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting about how there are seven Hermetic principles. There's 7 days of creation in the Bible, right? And then I was like, I'm super big on Carl Jung and the subconscious archetypes of the mind and whatnot. And I was like, I wonder if we can just combine these three to really get a deeper understanding as to the nature of what we call reality is. You know, if all of it really is just one thing. And, you know, and here we are trying to perceive said one thing and learn about that one thing, then let's, you know, try and see, because if you think all the way back to like before there was a Bible and before there was Torah and all these other, you know, different scripts and scrolls and tablets and all this other stuff, most of it was like word of mouth teaching, right? Like it was oral traditions. And it made me wonder, like, why would they be so against writing it down in the first place, that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, it was all oral tradition? What would be the idea as to why you would want to do that? Well, I believe a couple of reasons. You would take it out of context, or maybe you would take it literally, which I don't know which one's worse, to be honest with you. And so that's where we're going to get to today. And I'm not going to lie, dude. This is some unlock the simulation level shit that we're going to be talking about today. So if you're completely open-minded and, you know, I can't remember who said it. I think Aristotle said that the mark of an intelligent mind is one that can listen and not judge the words that are being said. I kind of butchered that one, but essentially just to be able to listen and don't react. That's kind of the idea here. So because it is going to be ruffling some feathers, like, and I don't mean to do it in any kind of negative way, or I'm not calling anybody dumb or stupid or, you know, whatever, ignorant. That's not what I'm trying to do today. I believe that the things that I'm getting into are at more of a deeper conscious, subconscious, unconscious level of the mind about how reality takes shape from the mind itself, and then projecting it out into this physical reality that we see every day.
I love it, man. Let's ruffle some feathers.
All right. So, you know, one of my favorite movies of all time is actually not even an old one. It's Ready Player One. And this was, and it's because of the kind of esoteric underlays in the movie that I really love. My favorite one is whenever he's trying to find all the keys, right? Like, so in the movie, this guy creates like this, you know, simulation video game type world, of which most people would prefer to be inside of that game rather than in this physical reality, because this physical reality has gone to absolute shit, right? Which I feel like we're probably not terribly far away from. But he talked about that there's these three keys to find in Ready Player One. So there's the copper key, the jade key, and the crystal key. Each key would unlock a gate that leads to the ultimate prize, which is the creator of the game. His name is Halliday, and he had this Easter egg, right? So to find the first key, he remembers. I'm talking about. Whenever I say he, it's the main character, which is Parzival. So Parzival remembers that Halliday is saying that in order to go forward, you have to go backward, almost like reverse engineering. And lo and behold, Parzival finds out that that's how he wins the first race to get to the key. So that's kind of like my idea for the show today: going backward to go forward. You know, almost like a little reverse engineering. I like that kind of ideology. You know, rather than just accepting the information given to you, go and find out how that information that is given to the masses was created in the first place, the underlying truths and philosophies behind it in the first place.
That seems like it would be a smart thing to do with any spiritual practice. There are so many that just adopt a certain belief system because their family does, or it's part of a tradition, or that's the way they're supposed to be. You're only supposed to do Christianity or whatever you grew up in, but they don't have any understanding of that belief and what it entails, what kind of energies you're invoking, deities you're dealing with. You're just going to give it all blindly to whatever faith that is. And it's if these belief systems do hold a level of power, then that would seemingly be giving your power away to whatever that system is, right?
100%. Yeah. And so I think that it's very important to understand, almost the etymological roots of every word that is out there given. So like, dude, even for example, we did the etymological understanding of the root word demon, right? Just trying to find out what a demon is. And then you find out that it connects to two main words. So you would have a daemon, or it's spelled daemon, but it's pronounced demon. It's Daemon. And that's something that it was kind of like the I don't know, I guess the egregore or the tulpa of the mind that is connected to higher realms, right? And like ancient emperors would actually, like, the ancient emperors believed that they had this connection to the heavens above as long as they were able to clearly converse with their demon, right? And so and you would actually even have, and this is over in Rome, like, so the Roman empires, or the Roman emperors would literally, their demons would be worshipped. So if you had, like, for example, like Emperor Constantine, he's, the first person to really bring Christianity over to Rome. But beforehand, he was worshiping Sol Invictus. And then he just so happens to go out onto a battlefield after hearing about this Christian story, and he sees some kind of vision, and, lo and behold, he's now a Christian, and he's trying to bring Christianity over to the Roman Empire, right? But initially, he was worshiping his demon and Sol Invictus.
But weren't they known as daemons? It was spelled a little differently as well, right?
Spelled that way, right? Yeah. And so if you look at it, it'd be on all of the coinage. So all the Roman emperors, they all had their faces on said coins, right? Like, that's why they say, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, kind of shit, right? Because it has his face on it, give it back to him, whatever. But all of the emperors, they all had their own coinage, and on their coinage, they would all have a sun behind them. And this was almost to be like a tribute to Sol Invictus or to their demon, right? And then you start to see some of the symbolism leaking over into Christianity, the sun being behind Jesus's head, right? And so it's very interesting whenever you start to look that up. And then you find out that like the idea of the jinn or the genie, right? It all connects. So like the idea of a jinn and genie, well, that goes back to the idea of a genius, right? And so the genius and the demon are basically the same thing. It is this higher connection to a higher realm that you would have the geniuses worshipped, which is essentially just a tulpa, if we're just being real here. It's a thought form created, and you're now believing that you're conversing with that thought form. It's not completely unheralded. I mean, people have people talk to Pleiadians, and people talk to Jesus, and people talk to aliens, and people talk to all these different gods, right? And so this was kind of just a placeholder for, it was almost like, imagine, just to use Constantine. This was Constantine's genius, right? And so a genius was seen as something that was outside of you, that you were almost pulling straight from the ether. And then that gets translated into a genie, and then ultimately into a jinn, right? And even whenever you're looking at a jinn, they'll tell you that like a jinn aren't always bad. Like jinn, they can be good jinn, there can be bad jinn. Well, that kind of sounds like what we're talking about with the demon, the genius, and having these connections to higher realms and stuff, right? So that
is so interesting, man. I was listening to, I forget who the researcher was, but they were discussing how ancients believed, some ancient cultures believed that at a certain point, humanity was just vessels for spiritual entities, that we were only there to be possessed by passing spirits as they came through. Somehow our consciousness evolved, or we were given our own individual consciousness. But it also connects with the belief that our thoughts aren't our own, that there is an information field or intelligences beyond our perception that carry the information and inspiration and creativity and any kind of creative abilities that we have is not coming from us, but from other bits of information field or even spiritual intelligences.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, going back to the beginning, if it all is one consciousness, then that would kind of make sense that you would have access to the field of consciousness in general, depending on maybe your frequency or your vibration, your connection to the higher realms. Now, I'm sure that that's based on certain practices, based on, certain health practices, even in order to be able to connect to that, kind of higher realm. And so, and this is actually something that I've been, thinking about myself, is that, like, what if we are the guardian angels to our human, like to the individual, right? So like, who goes, and this is, I talked about this in a previous episode, but like, who goes, to the bathroom with you? Who sleeps with you every night? Who drives in the car with you? Like, who experiences literally everything with you? Well, if you're that highest, best version of yourself, it would be your human body that is experiencing it with you, and vice versa, right? So you would feel like you would have kind of like a companion for the drive in that sense. So I don't know. That's a kind of a weird out there kind of theory, but I kind of dig it. But anyway, like all right, I do want to get over to my my theory here, as far as blending Jungian psychology, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and the 7 days of creation, because it's going to get wild and it's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, and I'm very open to being called crazy for a lot of this, just to let you know. I'm open to, and I don't try and pretend like I'm a know all, be all, end all kind of thing. It's just a working theory. So nobody come at me too hard. But so the early Christian mystics, the Essenes, the Hermeticists, Gnostics, and the Kabbalists, they all taught that Genesis is symbolic, not literal. So I decided to get a little weird here and combine what Carl Jung talked about with Genesis being a symbolic story of the human psyche assembling itself. So even the early mystics and ancient religious people knew not to write any of this down because it had to be word of mouth. Otherwise, people would take it out of context or take it literal, which is what you see a lot of people doing these days. I did a show about how the biblical flood and Noah's Ark couldn't have happened literally, and I damn near almost got canceled off of my own show for even mentioning it. So that's kind of how dangerous this is. But why would you need that story to not? Why would you need that story to only be taught by oral tradition if you were meant to take it literally? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So what we're going to be talking about is how all of these stories and teachings were about creating consciousness, the mind, the unconscious, and the subconscious. So don't take this in a literal and physical sense. If reality is some form of dream, simulation, matrix, or maybe kind of a combination of all of them, this might be how we interpret what it means to exist if the entire outer world is nothing more than a projection of the inner world. So, you following me, sir?
Gotcha, man. Let's go.
All right. So Carl Jung wrote that biblical creation myths are basically psyche maps of the psyche. Light would mean consciousness. The waters would be the unconscious. The firmament would be the ego and kind of the bounds of the mind. Right. If you think about it, like firmament is firmamente, controlling of the mind. It would be you taking control of your own mind. You would have the sun, moon, and stars. This is where it gets kind of weird, as archetypal patterns. So just the same thing that Carl Jung was talking about, how gods all represented just subconscious archetypes. I believe that the sun, moon, and stars would essentially be the archetypal patterns found within our conscious mind. The animals would be obviously your instinct, right? That's kind of like what they represent. They are all going off of instinct. The man, whenever man was created, would be the emergence of the self, as Carl Jung talks about. And then on the seventh day, whenever God rested, would be the individuation that Carl Jung talks about as like the wholeness, right? And to relay this into Gnosticism, Gnosticism teaches that creation is really the formation of consciousness. Light is the inner awareness. Firmament would be the mind barrier or the control of your mind. The earth is the ego structure. Stars would be the archetypes. Animals are the instinct. And humans receive the divine spark, or AKA Sophia's breath, you know. And also in Genesis. All right. So in Genesis, when interpreted through the mind or the psyche, it follows almost the same exact stages in the same exact order as the Hermetic laws. So I don't think that that's a coincidence. And we're going to see exactly how they are literally like blueprint overlays talking about the same thing, just taking different. Okay. This is so wild, dude. Whenever I found this, I was like, holy shit, let's get weird. So
Yeah.
The 7 days would then act as a mental emergence, an identity formation, a polarity differentiation, rhythmic cycles, instinct plus your higher mind, and then integration. That would be, if we're looking at the 7 days of creation, that would be what they represent, which actually is exactly the Hermetic model. So if you, and just looking at Genesis, for the people that take it literally, Genesis makes no literal sense. You know, it's just a story. But what is that story trying to portray? So if you are to take it literally, light existed before the sun. Days exist before time. The firmament would be a solid dome, which some people believe that. And religious people believe that the first time that it rained was during the biblical flood. So even a flood and building an ark is symbolic to the mind. So just wanted to throw that out there. So now we're going to go into how it's broken down day by day. So each day of creation, about how it corresponds to each Hermetic principle, because Genesis is essentially Hermetic wisdom written in story form. But before we do, so according to Wikipedia, this is just Wikipedia, they say that the Hermetic principles were articulated in the early 20th century, early 20th century, particularly in the book called The Kabbalion, which highly suggest everybody reads that. It's a very quick read, very good though. And that book was published in 1908 by authors known as the Three Initiates, which I think adds a little bit of a level of mysticism to it personally. However, the ideas that they encompass are rooted in earlier Hermetic texts and traditions dating back to allegedly from 100 to 300, right? So the exact time when Hermes Trismegistus lived is unclear, but he is often associated with ancient Egypt, possibly before the times of Moses, and is thought to have emerged during the Hellenistic period. So his teachings and writings known as the Hermetica were developed over several centuries. That's why you had like certain like different incarnations of Hermes, which I don't even know if we're supposed to take that literally, to be honest with you. I think that certain people were claiming to be Hermes because maybe they were channeling information from Hermes, or they were on the same thought pattern as Hermes was, or something like that, right? And that's what you'll see like all throughout, you know, even poets would say that they were William Shakespeare. And it was just like an extension of. And it's the same thing as the even like the Gnostic writings. They'll say, well, this was written by John, or this was written by so-and-so. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it was kind of like, here, we're going to try and connect these paths so you can see, you know, what they mean internally rather than the external kind of stuff, right?
It's so difficult to navigate through our ancient past just because 10, 15 years ago is like a fucked up game of telephone trying to relay information. Imagine centuries and the level of infiltration and inversion and changing things is off the charts. So it's difficult to navigate some of this stuff, but there's been a lot of great researchers recently that are bringing out some information that I think is incredible and we haven't looked at in a very long time. And I think that's why a lot of people are looking into things like Gnosticism again, because a lot of the concepts do make a lot of sense when we look at the way the natural world operates and excluding other spiritual practices and beliefs.
Oh, dude, and you start to look at some of the early Gnostics about how they were absolutely hunted for their beliefs. I mean, there was a reason why finding the Nag Hammadi text back in, what was it, 1946 or 1948 or something like that. There was a reason why that was like so profound whenever that happened, because there was like almost nothing on Gnosticism, and to see that it was able to kind of be like contained basically in the desert in Egypt somewhere, is quite a miracle, I believe. But if you look back at like the early Gnostics and dude, they like, if the Bible comes at any one sect of people harder than anybody else, I would say that it comes at the Gnostics the hardest, if you really think about it. They're known as the heretics of the Bible. They're known as the people that are spreading false lies and false rumors and all this other shit, right? And I don't think that that's... If what they were talking about, the Gnostics, if what they were talking about was so wrong and heretical and stuff like that, why would you need to go and like brutally murder all of them? If you look into the Cathars, for example, in I believe it was in the south of France, but in the Cathars, dude, they were like slaughtered over the course of, I think, 3 different popes. You had popes saying that we need to go and basically start a war against all these people, and it was a convert or die kind of situation. And my thought process is like, look, if they're so stupid and silly and they don't understand, why do you need to go and murder all of them?
Well, another way to think about it is who's really evil here? The ones committing murder or the ones just looking for answers about our reality? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting whenever you use their own words and, you know them by their fruits kind of thing. That's kind of 100%. The way I look at it. So anyhow, yeah, definitely look into Cathars if you haven't before, because that is a fucking rabbit hole of all rabbit holes right there. But all right, let's get back to it. So the idea of the first day of creation, right? In the Bible, it says, let there be light. Now, how that would portray itself as the Hermetic principle, well, the first Hermetic principle is mentalism, that everything is mind, right? So let there be light, everything is mind. So light would be awareness, creation would be a thought, and reality would be, I say reality with quotations, would be the mental projection. So day 1 is the moment that consciousness recognizes itself. The mind becomes illuminated. And this matches the Hermetic principle that all is mind and the universe is mental. So this light is the birth of your inner universe. Awareness turns chaos into something that you can perceive, right? And so this is what's fascinating is so I did a show on DMTX. The study is over at Imperial College in London. And my God, is that mind-blowing, the things that they have found. Because allegedly they were trying to map the DMT realm. You can't map it. But the idea over there is that, essentially what they found out is that whenever people smoke DMT, you're not hallucinating. It just gets rid of the, what is it called? The, there's a term for it. It basically damn it. I can't believe I can't think of the word. But anyway, it's basically like the filter that our mind uses to be able to perceive this physical reality. And so whenever you smoke DMT, it removes that filter. So that filter is no longer there. So what they found is that actually whenever you're smoking DMT, you're not hallucinating. Whenever you are not smoking DMT, you are hallucinating, which is quite a mindfuck, right? And so whenever this is saying that, awareness turns chaos into something that you can perceive, makes sense. If all this stuff is really happening, anybody that's ever done a mushroom trip and seen gears in the walls, you know what I mean? Like maybe that's really there, and just our filter is kind of filtering it out. It could be. So essentially, Genesis day 1 would be the mind awakening. All right. Day 2 would be in it talks about how the waters are divided, right? So day 2, if we're relaying it to the Hermetic principle, the Hermetic principle number 2 is correspondence. So as above, so below. Isn't it interesting how they talked about the waters being divided on day 2, and Hermetic principle number 2 is correspondence, talking about as above, so below.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
it's the split of the waters above and below may be the birth of duality. So your inner world versus your outer world, your spiritual versus your physical, your intuition versus your instinct, and your higher mind versus your lower mind. So this is exactly the principle of correspondence: as above, so below; as within, so without. So the firmament, aka your mind, becomes the bridge between your higher mind and your lower mind. So dual awareness is formed on day 2. Which is quite fascinating, I think, if you look at it in that sense.
You might be onto something here.
I hope so. Well, I mean, if that tickles your pickle, let's go over to day 3. Dry land appears on day 3 in the Bible. So the Hermetic principle number 3 is vibration. So in other words, nothing rests, everything moves. So how would land appear then? By the waters, meaning emotions and energy, vibrating into form. So day 3 is when emotions would crystallize into beliefs, thoughts become identity, patterns become personality. So everything you are is a vibration hardened, at least, on the surface, it looks like it's hardened into a form. So all matter is just a slowed down vibration, very slowed down vibration. That's why, whenever you hear about certain alien encounters, they say, oh man, it's just so dense to be on Earth. It's one of the hardest places you can go because it's so dense. People believe that it's physical reality and stuff like that. You hear about that with alien encounters. You hear about that with people doing psychedelics. You hear about that with people doing past life regressions, right? About how Earth it's a school, and it's one of the hardest schools you can go to. It's basically the Yale of the subconscious mind, right? So I think that is quite interesting. So if you look at it, so vegetation growing on day 3 in the Bible would equal thoughts reproducing and spreading, just like vibrations expanding outward. So if we're to look at Genesis day 3, it could literally mean the identity forms through vibration, which would make sense. If all you see whenever you look out without the filter is absolute chaos, I just imagine the DMT realm where you're seeing, little machine elves and crazy geometric perfection. And what are you going to do with that, right? But whenever you put that filter on, it slows it down. You're able to see something for what it is, at least through this one human perception. And maybe there's a little bit of something to learn at that point, I think.
I wonder if we're even looking at this in a way that maybe 100, 1,000 years from now, we'll have a completely different understanding of the creation story. I often wonder if there was a time in what we perceive as time, what we perceive as history, that there was human creation, or if somehow consciousness was always in form or always coming to be in a sense. I don't know. What do you think about the trigger for consciousness, for the initial trigger for creation of consciousness?
I think that it's just always existed, to be honest with you. And I think that it found a way to become more and more and more intelligent. I almost imagine the beginning of consciousness, if there ever was a beginning. As humans, we look at everything kind of on a day-to-day basis. We can't imagine something that just always has existed. But if we were to imagine something beginning, if there was a beginning, I would imagine that the primitive conscious that ultimately constructed the universe and all these different realities, almost as like cavemen, primitive, and it was learning about itself, and it was going through the process and everything about what it means to exist and what it means to have duality and what it means to have all these different things that eventually came to pass in how we look at our reality. And I would imagine that if you're trying to understand yourself a little bit better, maybe you would divide yourself into billions of different creations and then kind of bring that information back to the primitive kind of first consciousness or whatever. And then that consciousness maybe eventually, starts to expand a little bit. Because I think that ultimately that God or consciousness or the universe is, if it is just one thing, I would imagine it's pretty damn lonely. And so it's probably multiple reasons why you would want to go about creating everything if you're the only thing that exists. And maybe the first creation or the first consciousness or whatever was just trying to find a way to really understand how to love itself. Because whenever you love yourself, they say that that's whenever you're whole, right? So like the idea of basically becoming whole and reaching this state of enlightenment and blissed out and stuff like that is knowing that the outside world can't give you anything more than what you can give yourself. And so if you can give yourself love and respect and a blissful, happy state all the time, then you wouldn't necessarily need the outside world. Not necessarily need it, but you don't need it to have those certain types of emotions and, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Because you hear about like certain gurus out there. Like I always like listening to Sadhguru personally, amongst many other gurus. But that's what he says. He goes, dude, he didn't say dude, but he would say that I don't allow anybody to make me happy, and I don't allow anybody to make me sad, because it has to pass through my filter of what I allow myself to feel. Which, you know, you would say that might be a kind of enlightened individual if you look at life in that kind of way. Because now you're no longer controlled by things that are on the outside of you. You control basically the temperature within the house.
Right on.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. I mean, it's quite fascinating. I'm not going to lie to you. Whenever I first started looking into all this stuff, I just became obsessed with learning about all this stuff, you know, and I mean, hey, we're all just one individual trying to figure it all out. But
yeah, man. I think there's definitely some connections there.
Maybe. So all right, let's get over to day 4. Day 4 in the creation in the Bible is whenever the sun, moon, and stars were created, right? If you're trying to compare it to the Hermetic principle, that would be principle number 4, which is on day 4, which equals polarity. So everything has its equal opposite. So day 4 introduces polar opposites. So you have the sun and the moon, day and night, conscious and unconscious, reason and emotion, and then masculine and feminine. That would be whenever polarity was created as the 4th Hermetic principle, and the day 4 in the Bible whenever the sun, moon, and stars were all created. So this could be when time itself is born, and time is nothing more than just polarized cycles. So polarity would explain maybe your emotion, like if you're talking about the inward polarity, it would explain your emotional swings and internal conflict and even human contradictions, that like the idea that all truths are but half-truths, which is kind of a brain fuck if you start to think about it. But the inner cosmos would then start functioning through opposites, that there's always a good and bad and a light and dark and all these kinds of things. That's almost how our mind is wired, if you think about it. So basically the idea of the Genesis day 4 would be polarity becomes the structure of the mind. And if you think about it, especially in politics nowadays, I mean, if you vote for somebody that I didn't vote for, you're so far removed from what I believe about the goodness of this reality. You don't want to do this. You didn't vote for that. And it's like, it is a really good or a really bad. There's no gray in between, right? It is almost a spitting image of polarity. And you could say that is literally woven into the fabric of our brains and of our conscious minds. That is the lens of which we view reality. And that's why I believe that you're getting so many people just going to these extremes, especially politically these days, right?
100%, man. And I think a lot of our division comes from getting too deep into certain spiritual beliefs. I'm not sure if the belief systems stem from contact with otherworldly intelligences or miracles that were experienced in the past. Wherever these beliefs stem from, there's usually an intelligence, a higher power, a higher intelligence involved with that belief system. And in our ancient past, much of the spiritual belief systems led to conflict. They led to mass wars and conflicts and more division. And I'm wondering how much of these spiritual influences are a sort of infiltration into our reality to steer us away from our natural course of evolution, in a sense, sort of like etheric parasites in a way.
100%. And I think that a lot of these things are created for that purpose, because if you're trapped in duality, you're never going to be able to see above the board. You know, imagine like they're just keeping you as a pawn on the chessboard. You're not even the person that has the hand on the pawn. You're just the pawn almost being controlled as to where you move next, right? And so whenever you bring duality into the world, and you know you give the almost like there's a falseness of freedom of choice, I think, within this whole dualistic system that we have. And that dualistic system definitely goes beyond politics. It goes beyond just religion. It goes like it's interwoven into literally everything into our lives. And so I think, but the reason that they do that is because they want you seeing that you only have two choices. Because if there was a third choice, you'd realize who's controlling those pawns. And that's really where I came to in the conspiratorial realm, is whenever people started, and even I was sucked right into it myself. I mean, I'm imperfect too. I'm trying to get there, but like I was sucked right into it. You know, I thought that the whole idea of Trump becoming, you know, he was Q and nothing can stop what is coming, and he's going to drain the swamp, and he's going to do all these amazing things. It is literally just another form of duality. That's all it is. And so whenever you can remove yourself from that and see it from all the different angles, now you're like, oh, okay, so politics is just for like uninitiated people. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like a primitive way of understanding reality whenever you think that you only have two choices. And I'm sorry, if you only got two choices, like there is no freedom of choice. Like that's not freedom at all if you only got two choices. It just reminds me of like, you know, in a sense, like religion. You know, religion will say that, you know, believe this or you go to hell. Well, I thought we had freedom of choice. Well, you do. You know what I mean? So how do I have freedom of choice if one of the two choices that I have is eternal, you know, hellfire? Like that's not necessarily a choice. So I think that that's kind of the idea, is wrapping it all into dualism in that sense, is the false sense of freedom and all that fun jazz. So yeah, I'm trying to completely remove myself from all of the, you know, like there's always two teams to every single thing in life, and you got to get out of that, dude, or else you're just going to be controlled.
Yeah, it also makes me wonder what the possible true nature of the original creation, the original human creation was, if there was such a thing, if we weren't always here in a sense. But the true nature meaning, were we benevolent beings? Were we spiritual beings? Did we know we had a connection to something greater, or were we just blankly put here, memory wiped, and no awareness of anything, just survival mode, which can lead to a lot of destruction and, immoral behavior, if you will. But where did we begin as far as our true nature of good or evil?
Oh man, that's probably the $1 million question, I would imagine, you know, because there's people still to this day that have a hard time answering that in their perspective of the world. You know, it's like, I mean, and I've talked to like a lot of witches and magicians and stuff like that they'll say, and not all of them, but some of them will say there is no such thing as light magic and black magic. Like there's only one magic, and it's almost like the Force from Star Wars, right? And it encompasses everything. That the idea of something encompassing everything would have to be in there. So it wouldn't necessarily be good or evil. It's just everything. And if we're talking about if it is just one consciousness, then like, you know, we would share the same consciousness from the lowest scum of the earth kind of people and the highest, you know, most amazing kind of people, and then beyond. I think that all of the people that have ever existed, all the people that will ever exist, and all the people that currently exist are all within this giant one consciousness, and it's not good or bad. It's just, everything. And
Right.
so, but I do think that there are certain, like the idea of like within magic and stuff and witchcraft, people that do baneful magic and hexes and curses and all that kind of stuff. I personally believe, this is just my own personal thing, I would never practice a hex or a curse or baneful magic or anything like that, because I think that whenever you do something bad, you're almost opening up that doorway in your mind to allow something bad to happen back to you. And that's why I think that it's so important that the Bible even talks about, like, love your neighbor as yourself. Because whenever you do something good for somebody, it makes you feel good. Maybe it brings a little bit of good into your life, and now you don't have that weird paradox of, like, good and bad necessarily. It's almost like it's like karma in a sense. Many people have been trying to describe karma for the longest time, and even within like Buddhism, they'll say that the idea is to ascend higher than the bounds of karma itself. And so that's why you shouldn't give in to good or bad. And it's all, dude, this spiritual stuff is like, it is hard. Like it's difficult to answer some questions like that. But yeah, I think that, it's only beneficial to do good. Like,
right.
To do good, to be good, to treat others exactly how you'd want to be treated.
And it can't be simplified. Don't be a douchebag. Love thy neighbor. There you go.
Put it on a t-shirt,
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. So I want to finish up these last few days here of creation.
Yeah.
Right. So day 5 in the Bible, it talks about the creating the creatures of the sea and the sky. Right. So the Hermetic principle, the 5th Hermetic principle is rhythm would be the pendulum swinging. Right. So day 5 would be all about your emotional tides, mental cycles, waves of thoughts, your highs and lows, inspiration and depression, fear and courage. The sea would equal your emotional rhythms. Remember, this is all internal. Like, don't even, like, just use the external world almost as symbols for your subconscious mind, right? So the sea would then be a representation of your emotional rhythms. The sky would be a representation of your mental rhythms. And even like Hermeticism teaches that the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. So your emotions and thoughts would be rhythmic, not random. So essentially, Genesis day 5 would be representative of the mind's rhythms and cycles being activated. Maybe that's where it all started right there.
Right on.
Day 6 would be the day that the animals and humanity were created. So yeah, day 5, the creatures of the sea and the sky were created. Day 6, animals and humanity were created. The Hermetic principle number 6 is cause and effect. So nothing would happen by chance. So look at animals as the instinctual cause and effect, and humans being the conscious cause and effect. So day 6 is when karma, consequences, choice, and intentional action enter the subconscious, the psyche of the mind, right? So this would be the day that humans gain self-awareness, moral reasoning, the power to choose causes, and the responsibility for effects. So maybe this would be the moment that humanity becomes the creator, becomes the made in the image of God, right? Like the idea that we're made in the image of God would essentially be the day that we become like God or like that of the creator in that sense. And so that would be ascending from your animalistic mind to your higher mind, which would be representative of the human. Hue meaning light and man, obviously, right? So it's the light version of you. And so essentially every cause has its effect and every effect has its cause, according to Hermeticism. And so on day 6, the mind would gain the ability to create reality intentionally, because that's all we're really doing anyway. If you really think about it, like we have a lot more control over the experience that we experience of what we call life and what we call reality, because it's all some kind of internal combustion of what's going on inside of us. And so if we can try and master ourselves, to know yourself is like one of the greatest keys of the universe, they say, right? Like to know yourself, it's like, it's funny. There's this old Sufi mystic. His name was Rumi, and he had a quote that says, I tried finding God and all I found was myself. And I tried finding myself and all I found was God. Kind of in that weird sense like that, you know? So if you are able to connect with God in that sense, or the all, the source, the universe, whatever, if you are able to mesh yourself back into that kind of higher state, then you would be separating yourself from your lower animal human instinct. Now you're not so much worried about binging at McDonald's. You're not so much worried about, you know, banging 30 chicks a week. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be weary of the information that's coming in because you know the effect that it's going to have on you, and it's just a domino effect. And so you're going to be putting yourself in better situations, eating healthier, you know, even watching what you're saying, you know, all the different words that you say, all the thoughts that you think, because you know that it's going to somehow manipulate the reality in a way or not. Like if you're looking at life like it's a dream or something, I don't know. I just love that kind of stuff. So essentially on day 6, the mind would gain the ability to create reality intentionally. And then finally on day 7, God rested on the 7th day. Everybody knows that. But this is where it gets even weirder, dude. This is probably the weirdest one. So day 7, the Hermetic principle, the 7th Hermetic principle, the final one is the Hermetic principle of gender. So if you think about gender in the sense of divine masculine and divine feminine, right? The absolute highest, top, best version of masculinity and femininity. So most people would say that this is the most misunderstood principle, which it commonly is. So gender in Hermeticism means your conscious plus your subconscious, your thought plus your feeling, and then your will plus your imagination. That would be the idea of gender. So day 7 would be the balance, the blending of the opposites. It's the moment that the mind integrates, the psyche unifies, the divine masculine, which kind of represents the awareness, joins with the divine feminine, which would represent the intuition, right? So this union itself, once you become like fully like engulfed in your divine masculine and your divine feminine at the same time, that would create an inner peace. So this would be God resting, would be the mind achieving equilibrium. So that then God would be able to rest. I finally got to this place now, you know? And so
it seems like it's not only telling a story of creation, it is mirroring the ascension process of spiritual awareness, basically.
yeah, it's almost like a roadmap. You know, and each individual can do it, is what this is kind of alluding to. That's what like all the mystery schools and you know, all of the different branches of the occult. I think that the occult is probably some of the most misunderstood shit that there is. If you look into Kabbalism, you look into Hermeticism, you look into Sufism, like and many other ones, right? But like, I think that it's very, very, very misunderstood. And they're like, well, you see that there's a symbol, there's a 6, you know, there's a swastika or whatever. But then you go back to the roots of the swastika, and it's supposed to be like balance and peace. You know, it doesn't make any sense that it was even turned into some kind of negative thing. And I think that that's what they try and make these things look like they're horrible. Like I did a deep dive on Rosicrucianism. I was like, oh my God, how is this ever seen as anything negative? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's all about...
Well, our perception forms our reality, and the parasitic ruling class knows how to weaponize our perception using psychological operations, mind control. They're masters at it, so they can steer the collective perception in any direction that they want. At least they used to. I'm hoping there's more awareness of this now, but if we focus on something and we truly believe that it is evil because we've been told it's evil by certain researchers or authors or people who look into those certain topics, and they're of that same perception that it is evil, that is all it will be until someone else looks at it in a different light, which it can be looked at in many different ways.
100%.
It just all depends on where you're personally going to go with it. Where does it resonate with you? And I think that is also can apply to our everything in our reality. What we focus on will become our reality.
100%, dude. Think about and this is probably where I'm going to get canceled. I'm not going to lie. But think about the Baphomet, for example. Okay. Like everybody knows the image of the Baphomet, the two fingers pointing up, the two fingers pointing down. It's a dude with tits, right? Like it's literally like, it's painted as if it's a demon or I'm not even saying that the Baphomet is a real thing. I think that it's just a subconscious archetype, right? Like it's supposed to represent divine feminine and divine masculine. It's the two fingers up and the two fingers down, which is literally and what that represents within magic and the occult. Whenever you have and you'll see, for example, like if anybody out there plays with tarot, right? The magician, which is the first place that the fool goes to on the fool's journey. He meets the magician first. And it's actually supposed to be the fool. Like this is him evolving throughout all these different phases. But the idea that the magician holds his wand up into the sky and he has two fingers pointing down. It's basically to be that he is a conduit for receiving information from the heavens, from the ether, from the divine, and he represents the conduit kind of receiver, and he's pointing it towards the ground, essentially trying to bring heaven onto earth. Yet somehow that is described as evil. It's like we should want to bring heaven to earth. We should want to bring happiness and joy and peace and blissfulness and all these things to earth. Now, some people will say the idea of doing that, and this is where you'll get to the conversation of is there a difference between dark magic and light magic? It's like, are you doing that for material gain? Then, okay, I guess you could see that as black magic, because the idea is not to gain materially. It's the idea to gain philosophically, gain spiritually, gaining information to help you see beyond the veil and to see for what this is. If you're doing a magic spell to try and put a Lambo in your driveway, it's probably not going to help you spiritually. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it'll brighten your mood because you can kick that baby up to 160 on the Autobahn. I'm sure that's a fun time. But spiritually evolving, maybe not,
Right.
So yeah, just as far as the Baphomet though, I believe they made this creature look like a beast out of hell, right? Showing that the idea of divine equilibrium is somehow satanic. It makes no damn sense when you really look at it. So, but to be fair, as I said, it was never meant to be expressed outwardly. This is all supposed to be something that the individual achieved inwardly. And so I believe personally that this may be the actual hidden esoteric key, or the Ankh, if you will. I don't think that Genesis is about the world being created. I think it's about your mind being created according to the Hermetic law. It's a metaphysical map of how consciousness becomes human and learns to wake back up. That is my understanding. If we're trying to combine the 7 Hermetic principles, Jungian psychology, along with the 7 days of creation, that is kind of just a theory that I'm working with right now. What do you think about all that?
I think you're onto something. I know that the more spiritual awareness we have of the true nature of how this matrix operates and the connections with our consciousness, how powerful our consciousness and awareness can be, the more we tap into that, the less power those at the top that are pulling strings have. And they know this, so they've weaponized spiritual beliefs and they've steered the collective in certain directions so that they would be totally afraid of exploring some of these empowering topics, because they know that if we have that knowledge, we will no longer be reliant on things that daddy government now has the monopoly on and we rely on from them. So it's all about taking our power back with all of this stuff. And it goes across the board. It's not just with the hidden occult belief systems. It's having a better understanding of the spiritual belief that you are already a part of. If you're Christian, have a better understanding of what true Christianity is, not just churchianity or what people in your local MAGA group are telling you it is. Actually, look into some things and do your own research and experience what some of these systems really are by learning the true power behind it, I would say.
100%. And something that I've been really looking into, there's a huge movement that is happening right now where people are starting to divide Christian philosophy into what Jesus said versus what Paul said. Because if you look at most of the New Testament, most of what people think that Jesus said and what he represented is seen through the lens of this Paul character. And so some people are actually saying that Paul never actually existed, that Paul actually represents the government's version of Jesus.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of crazy because Paul contradicts a few things of what Jesus said. It's like, are we going to believe the actual Savior, or are we going to believe what some dude saw in a vision after he was already murdering all these Christians in the first place? Like, if you want to bastardize, if you want to take control of a narrative, you're going to then not be seen as an enemy. You're going to be seen as like an ally at that point. And so there's a lot of weird shit going on with Paul if you really look into it too.
Wow, that's interesting. Some of the most simple and empowering spiritual teachings come from the teachings of Jesus Christ. And if you have that understanding, if you want a simple but powerful spiritual path, there's your path right there. Just follow those teachings. And in my perspective, you'll get the key to the matrix. You'll get your way out of here, but it's been convoluted and infiltrated, and we have the dogma thrown in there so much that people become wrapped up in the biblical version of some of these, like you said, the government sanctioned version.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, a good way of really looking at Christianity in general is that, you know, for example, I have 2 podcasts. We have a decent sized following on both. Now, all of the alleged followers, which to be honest, I don't like to call them followers. I don't like to call them fans. I like to just say that, you know, here we are. We're all just learning this together. I'm no guru. I'm no like somebody that has more knowledge than everybody else. It's just that I have time to look up all this stuff because it's what I do for a living, you know? And so to kind of convey it into the idea of a follower, well, whenever you have somebody following you, they might be learning your philosophies, but they're not putting necessarily it into practice on a moment-to-moment basis. It's almost like you're becoming a fan of Christianity rather than doing like Jesus did, thinking like Jesus did. Instead of following him, he said, be like him. There's a major difference in following and being like. Wouldn't you say? Like for example,
100%.
Even the listeners of Forbidden Knowledge News, are they now going to start Forbidden Knowledge News 2, Forbidden Knowledge News number 3? Like, most of them are just going to be listening. And there's nothing wrong. Like, I love listening to other people. I love listening to other philosophies and everything because it sparks a little curiosity and maybe it'll lead your mind into a direction that you didn't think it was going to go, right? But that being said, you know, the follower is not being like. There's a major difference there. So, and I think that if people really started trying to be like Christ rather than just following him and calling him Lord and God and putting him up on this crazy pedestal that they're never going to be able to achieve, what if you actually believed that you could achieve at least 10% of what Jesus did? Because even he said, you'll be able to do all these things and then some. People like to throw that part out, you know? So I don't know. That's kind of the way I like to look at certain things, and instead of following, replicating, you know?
100%. We're all just trying to figure this out, man. We came here with our memories wiped. We didn't have any keys or cheat codes. We're learning. That's what it's all about, man. And I love it. Jonathan, thank you so much. Any final thoughts before we close out?
No, I appreciate you. I love the direction that your show is going into. I'm not going to lie to you because I vibe with it myself. There's only so many conspiracies that you can listen to and have your mind shattered in a bunch of different ways until it just becomes like, I don't know, it just becomes like something that you do rather than a reason for doing it.
And if you're still interested in conspiracies, you want to know deeper. You want to go further than what is on the surface that's already been presented, and the why and the spiritual nature of some of these things, because it all goes back to some form of metaphysical energy in its origin, I believe.
100%. And, before I ever started the Cult of Conspiracy, I used to listen to podcasts like yours and Lindsay from Rogue Ways and Crow 777 and Tinfoil Hat. Those were like my favorite podcasts that I would listen to, right? And, one of the things that Sam Tripoli would always say before I ever even started the cult was that conspiracy always leads to spirituality. And that's the beautiful thing. Like, conspiracy is good. Use it as a tool to break your understanding so that you can rebuild it back up into something that you can use rather than people using you, like the people that find themselves being taken advantage of by certain government conspiracies and stuff like that. Like, unfortunately, we were all led down the wrong path whenever we heard that they found a passport in the rubble of 9/11. Some people still believe that. And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, you're probably not going to be helped. Like, if you believe that kind of stuff, like if you believe the moon landing footage, I'm sorry. Like, you're not even looking. You're just accepting information at this point, which, to be honest, that's exactly what the school system does to us in the first place. It teaches us to remember certain things. It doesn't teach us how to think, right? And, so I think that's kind of the little difference right there. I think that conspiracies are still very important. I think that every now and again, you do need your worldview shattered because, even the phoenix has to burn down into ash before it's reborn again. But what are you going to do once you're reborn again? What are you going to do once your mind and your own philosophy of what it means to exist was shattered? Like, are you going to just keep on having it shattered, or are you going to try and build up on top of it? And that's why I love, my podcast. One of my podcasts is Meta Mystics. If anybody wants to be able to go over there and check out that show, we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/metamystics. That link is in the show notes of every single episode that I do. But we're also on YouTube, because we don't say anything that we can get canceled on YouTube, at least not in the spiritual realm. Not yet anyway. So go and check it out over there. It's just youtube.com/metamystics. Anybody, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere that you listen to your shows. We're on TikTok, Instagram, all the socials and everything. That's for both of my shows, for the Cult of Conspiracy and Metamystics. So I appreciate you having me, dude.
Yeah, man. Always a wonderful time. We'll be doing it again. Until next time, everyone, have an amazing evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.
My God, those conversations just hit different. Whenever you're not being judged and you can just have open-ended kind of conversations like that, it is just so much fun. I love diving as deep as we possibly can into the spiritual and philosophical and magical pools of consciousness. That is just my absolute favorite. So it might seem like a bunch of malarkey to some people, and that's okay. Like I said in that show, I don't aspire to be the one that knows everything that is coming from a position of authority. Not my role. That's not the role that I want. It's just diving into theories, seeing what it feels like whenever you wear it in your mind. I can't get enough of that. So y'all let me know what you think. And the best place to be able to let you know, or to let us know what you think about this episode and all the other episodes, is to go to and leave a review, 5 stars, a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to your podcasts out there. And it really helps the algorithm. It helps these kind of concepts get seen by more people. And I'm always open to interpretation. I'm always open to a little bit of judgment, where I got it wrong, where I could have got it a little bit more right. let me know, and that is the best place to be able to do that. If you want access to all of these shows days in advance, sometimes even up to a week in advance, come over to patreon.com/metamystics. That link is down in the show notes below. You'll be able to get all the shows days in advance. You'll be able to see all the video, and it's completely commercial free. That is all on one tier on Patreon for $3.33 a month. I hardly doubt that you would even remember missing where that $3.33 went. But that's why we created it. We're not trying to get super rich or anything off of it. We just want to be able to put out information behind a wall that is not going to get canceled, that, you know, it's almost like a little secret society itself, you know, and the secret society doesn't hide because it wants to, you know, keep this information for itself. The secret society hides because of fear of judgment, because that's just how it was back in the day. You started talking about any of this kind of stuff, just ask the Cathars. You know, ask many of the different, you know, people with different strands of thought. You know, it's interesting. It's unfortunate that a lot of people had to die for certain information to even look at it this way. That doesn't even sound right. That doesn't seem right. If what you believe is the highest truth, then you wouldn't necessarily be worried about somebody saying an alternative theory, because you would already have the best one. You would have the most understood one. And if it's the most understood, then it should never be misconstrued. And if it can never be misconstrued, then you shouldn't have to worry about any kind of opposing ideology in the first place, is my thought. So yeah, come and check us out. But I think right now, what we're going to do is a little tarot reading. Can't do a meta episode without a tarot reading, so hang tight. We're going to get to that. All right, so that card came in and it jumped right out. So that is the 3 of Wands card, and I will read what that means. I have a good idea about what it means, but I like reading the interpretation anyway. So the 3 of Wands, adventure lies ahead of you. As you expand into a new role or identity, you have plenty of support. Filled with ambition and excitement, you're ready to expand into the next phase of your adventure with the 3 of Wands card. A man depicted in this card has his back turned, which means that as the viewer, you see what he sees. He stands between 2 wands planted in the ground while he holds the 3rd for support. He gazes out toward ships on the water, indicating the expansive nature of his dealings and suggesting that he works well with a team. The support of others allows him to conserve his energy without burning out and positions him to direct his considerable prowess toward big picture tasks. Wow, I love that. I don't remember ever pulling that card. Interesting. So yeah, the upright key meanings are expansion and growth. Obviously, numerology is 3, which usually means expansion or collaboration. The spiritual message says, surrounding yourself with inspiring people will help you expand to the next level of personal growth. You are expanding your spiritual practice, whether you have the support of a community or you are calling in new friendships. Consider making travel plans that will expand your horizons and inspire you. Solid. I love it. That is a great card. I can't believe, if we have pulled it before, I really don't remember it, but that is a great card, I think. So yeah, we're not going to do a meditation this episode because, you know, I don't want to take away from Sean, you know, and we can always just meditate on our own time. So yeah, we will see you on the next episode. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed this. It was a little bit different than what we're used to, but I thought, man, it was such a good conversation. We needed the one to be able to hear it, and the cult members out there to be able to hear it, and everybody else to listen to this episode. Not gonna lie, this episode could get me canceled, but I welcome it. Bring it on, baby. If you get canceled for just saying words and interpreting information differently than how you're supposed to, makes you wonder why people get canceled like that, you know? Makes you wonder. But anyway, if Chris Matthew from Forbidden Knowledge News came here and he taught you anything, it's that you don't know what you don't know. So don't just get weird, stay weird.